Okay, so welcome to week 4, I think. And today we're going to be looking at it's two lectures, split into two videos on arguably one of the two most and potentially the most important female political figure in Hawaiian history, and also absolute like in my opinion, hands down, the most like the sharpest, most I don't know, just most capable political figure in Hawaiian history. I mean, in terms of just pure politics, the ability to um, grasp, seize, and manipulate power, hands down, the most capable figure in Hawaiian politics, and that's Kaahumanu. And um, a lot of people have beef with Kaahumanu because of the Kapu system, the overthrow of the Kapu system. We'll get into that, but it's hard to deny that she's just hands down just one of the most incredibly capable, and sharpest political figures of Hawaiian history. So let's get into it. The first lecture is everything up until um, basically up until Christianity. Then everything in the second lecture is everything after Christianity. Although there's actually a little bit of wiggle room in there in terms of time, but I've made it into these two different slides. Move this over here. I go there. Squish the camera over a little. Okay, so Kaahumanu. We talked about last time Keaomoku, her father, who's one of Kamehameha's advisors. He's, again, incredibly sharp, really smart political figure. But dude, if there doesn't seem to be a moment in his adult life where he's not starting some shit somewhere. He gets into it with Colonial Puu, and then he goes to Maui and he marries Namahana, um, who's the widow. And saying wife and widow, it's a little bit, we're reading a lot into it. But Namahana had been one of the partners of Kamehameha Nui, the former king. Um, so she's the sort of sister-in-law of the current king, Kahekili, who's not very fond of this new relationship. Um, so Keaomoku and Namahana and their daughter Kahumanu, Ahekili, they have to flee, right? Goes to the Big Island, reunites with Kamehameha, becomes one of the four Kona uncles, and all of these stories, like he's the one who kills Kivala. Oh, like he's just constantly involved, like he's in the middle of everything. And part of it is because he's Kamehameha's like chief advisor. Like he is the guy that really a lot of everything goes through. And so when his daughter, like his marriage of Kahumanu um, to Kamehameha uh, is very clearly a political move in terms of um, cementing that bond between Kamehameha and Keeaumoku. But it's also, um, it works out well for Kamehameha because when Keeaumoku dies, um, his dying words to Kamehameha are the only one you have to worry about, the only one who can take power away from you is Kahumanu. So keep her very close and don't piss her off. Um, and it's because she's such a smart political figure, because she has all these, like from her mom's side, she has so many of these strong Maui connections. Um, she has a lot of strong family connections on the father's side, the Kona people. Um, it's that between those things and her sharp political mind, like she's a danger. But as long as she's close to Kamehameha, then she is a benefit. She's going to use all those connections, but also her sort of political savvy to help keep the king in power. And that's what we actually see during most of the reign after that. Is Sorry, adjusting the lighting here. I don't know how to do that actually. Oh, wait. This is the side that's not. Ah, there we go. Okay. Um, it's still not very good. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go along. Okay. So, where were we? Okay. Boom. 1819. So up until 1819, kaahumanu is quite a bit younger than Kamehameha, but by 1819, so she would have been, let's see, she's probably born sometime in the 70s, um, which would put her at about 16. Yeah, in her 40s or 50s at this point. Um, so when Kamehameha dies, it's slated. They already know that Liho Liho, who's Alexander, or sorry, just Liho Liho, who's Kamehameha the second, is Kamehameha's son with Keopuolani. And Keopuolani, which we talked about last time, is genealogy-wise one of the highest ranking sort of spouse that he could possibly get. Like that's it. She's of incredibly high rank, and their children will all be of incredibly high rank because of that. Liho Liho is going to be proclaimed king. He's like 19 years old, but Kukailimoku is given to Kekuo Okalani. And again, like we've seen this end poorly before. Like Kamehameha was giving Kukailimoku, and he took out Kivala'o. Umi was giving Kukailimoku, and he took out Hakao. So is Kamehameha trying to repeat history? Is he trying to end this cycle of it by having because he knows these two are very close, like very, very close. Unlike Kivala'o and Kamehameha, unlike Umi and Hakao, these two cousins are very close. But it seems to also be Kekuo Okalani he's a much more serious war leader, so that could be it. Maybe Kamehameha wants to make sure these two are connected still. We have to read his motives back into it because we don't have them written down. But as he's dying, Kaahumanu is the last one to talk to him, and when she comes out and tells everybody the king is dead, she says, on his deathbed, he proclaimed me Kuhina Nui, which is a new job, but the prime minister, and essentially says that Liho Liho and I will share rule. He's the king, but we will share the actual management and administration and rule of the islands. And look, it's really easy to look back in this and say like, oh, well, that's like, this is really convenient. You're the one in the room when he says this, and he just happens to give you all this power right before he dies. And it is. It's really convenient that it happened. But you know what? No one said anything. It's not like Hawaiians aren't able to see like possible bullshit when they hear it. No one says anything because Kaahumanu is going to be a more capable leader than this 19-year-old kid. Most of the people in the court that are the powerful people in the court are her relatives as much as his relatives. A lot of the people owe her. She's very capable. No one seems to have a real problem with this. At least no one that's going to be able to say anything out loud and not have consequences happen to them. It's kind of this weird situation where like she probably, I'm not entirely sure this was Kamehameha's actual last wish, but he had to know something was coming, because he knew how sharp a political operator was and how ambitious she was. She was very ambitious. Okay, so one of the first things she does is end the kapu system. So after the death of a ruling chief, there's a period of ainoa, so free eating, where all the kapu are gone, but especially the kapu around eating. So women were not allowed to eat pork. Men and women were not, during these sort of kapu periods, men and women were not allowed to eat together. Women were not allowed to prepare food for men. Men had to prepare men prepared all the food, because women were not supposed to touch the men's food, especially, again, during these kapu seasons. there's all these regulations, and they're associated with the ruling chiefs. The ruling chiefs are the ones who it's important to maintain these kapu, and their ability to maintain these kapu among the population signals their, well, it's supposed to signal their connection to the gods, but also it signals their ability to control the population. When a ruling chief dies, they're all gone. There's a period of mourning, and during this period, Liho Liho goes down to Kauai. Kona is where the sort of royal capital is. He goes to Kauai, and he's sort of mourning with Kekuokalani. Now, they're hearing rumors that Kaahumanu and Keopuolani are going to try and end the Kapu system. And what is supposed to happen is Liho Liho, after this period of mourning, comes back and as this sort of returning chief, restores the Kapu. The same thing happens at the end of the Makahiki season. The ruling chief comes back and restores the Kapu. And when the Kapu, especially the Ai Kapu, are restored, then chiefly order is returned to the land. And this is how it's supposed to happen, but they keep hearing these things, and they know there's all these rumors that Kaahumanu and Keopuolani have been violating Kapu privately for a while, and Kamehameha was kind of turning a blind eye to this, and Kekuokalani is worried because he thinks they're going to try and end the Kapu system, and Kekuokalani is very devout. He's similar to Kamehameha in this way. He's very devout to the old system, to the religious system. Liho Liho is kind of wavering in between because he doesn't seem to be very strong. He's 19. His mother and his stepmother are both on one side, his cousins on the other side. Liho Liho is raised kind of as a priest, more so than a ruler. So if the Kapu system is gone, he's screwed. Kaahumanu already took power now by declaring herself Kuhina Nui, and now she's going to be able to take power by, like, reinforce that power by ending the Kapu system, ending this religious system that at the same time is one of the things that he still has because he is the Ali'i Nui, and because he has sort of religious training. So he's screwed. And Kaahumanu, Keopuolani, and the high priest, this guy Heva Heva, they all meet and they argue they all meet together with Liho Liho, and they argue for the end of the Kapu system. And this is, again, like, why is the high priest in there? We're not entirely sure, but it may be a simple loss of faith. It may be a political decision. Interesting, like, he ends up, after all this happens, he converts to Christianity. He moves to why is it blanking? I want to say Kualoa, but it's not Kualoa. But up on the North Shore, he moved back to Waimea Bay. He moves back to the Waimea Valley and is farming for the rest of his life. Like, he's still elite. He's still able to grab some of the choice lands. But that's what he's doing. But why does he argue for it? I don't know. Why does Kaahumanu argue for it? We don't know. Why does Keopuolani argue for it? We don't know. But there's some suggestions. There's some theories. One is there's a feminist theory that it's like, and it's a very sort of American feminist theory where they're just like, they're just tired of, like, the Aikapu prevents women from having certain like being able to eat with the men, and there's certain religious elements that favor men, and so Kaahumanu wasn't going to put up with that, and she got rid of it, which is, some of it is reading 20th century feminist thought into the 19th century. Like, she's already the most powerful person in the kingdom. Like, I'm not sure how much that really seemed to bother her. But another thing that is happening is this is that time of death. This is that time of mass death from epidemics, etc. The gods are supposed to, you uphold the Kapu system, the gods uphold their end of the bargain. They keep everything sort of, you keep things pono in terms of the Kapu system, and they keep things pono in terms of, like, the world around you. Clearly that's not happening, right? So either we violated the Kapu or something, and the gods have turned against us, in which case we can't do anything, or the gods don't exist, or the gods are weak because we are upholding the Kapu system. Kamehameha was very devout in upholding the Kapu system, and people were still dying. It's possible they were just done with it. And it's hard to really tell. The mass death thing like cannot be, it just can't be taken out of the equation. Like so many people are dying. Their argument might have been that we follow the kapu system, people are still dying. To hell with the gods. And this is, we see this a lot in Polynesian sort of religious thinking, which is when the gods fail you, you discard the gods. So Liho Liho is going back and forth between Kekuokalani, Kaahumanu, and eventually he returns to Kona at the period, like when the moment he's supposed to sort of return as chief and restore the kapu system. And when he returns, Kaahumanu, Keopuolani, and Heba Heba sit down with Kauikeo Oli, who's Kamehameha the Third, who's like 12-ish at this point. They sit down with him. They just start eating, and they violated the kapu in front of him. He has two choices. One is to declare them kapu violators and try to enforce the kapu by putting them to death, which means he's going to have to put his mother and his stepmother to death. I'm not sure. I don't know if Kauikeo Oli would also be sort of lumped into this. And he would have to actually find people who would be able to do that. But he's at the court in Kona, and everyone around him is way more loyal to Kaahumanu and Keopuolani than they are to him. So even if he tried that, success is pretty low. And again, he would have to kill his mother and his stepmother, and potentially his little brother. Or he just allows the kapu system to end, and Liho Liho allows the kapu system to end. Kaahumanu, and it's hard to tell exactly how much of a role in planning this and thinking this out Keopuolani had. She's much more quiet. She stays in the background. But everything Kaahumanu does, she has to do it Keopuolani too. The two of them together have so much power and so much influence. But Kaahumanu seems to be she's definitely the front of all these things. And she seems to be the one driving a lot of it. And that's it. The kapu system is over. She ended it essentially. She put Liho Liho in a position, and this is where that political mindset, that like small scale, small p politics, maneuvering people around, she put him in a position that he could not win, and he had to give up. And the thing is, by doing this, he gives up power. She already took all that rule away from him, but now she's taking a lot of influence away from him because it's showing everybody who the real power at court is. That she pushed this on him shows that she is the power at court, and that may also be one of the reasons she's doing it, is just to flex that muscle and gain even more of a sort of influence over Liho Liho and rule. Kekuokalani is real. He has Kukailimoku. He has his supporters. He has a couple of hundred fighting men. He and his wife Monono decide to march, to go to battle. They're going to attack Kaahumanu. They're going to attack all these chiefs down in Kona. They're going to lose. They know they're going to lose bad because there are still way more soldiers under Kalanimoku, who's the brother of Kaahumanu, than there are that are going to support them. And they go to this battle of Kuomo'o, and they're slaughtered. And there's this sort of like romantic vision of them, like Kekuokalani and Monono standing back to back and fighting until they're dead, just fighting this. They know they lost before they even marched. They could have not marched. They could have joined in, but they decided that this was the cause that they were going to die for. That they'd rather die fighting for the old religious system than live under sort of Hawaii without that system. So now we look at Kamehameha II. No, he's trained to be a ruler and a priest, more a priest than a ruler. But Kaahumanu is denied in both. She's grabbed all the power. He's 19. He has all the stuff he wants. People will listen to him for like personal things, but he has no power. So he drinks a lot. He seems to like he has some power, actually, some influence, but in reality, he doesn't really have much. He can't do anything big in Hawaii. Kaahumanu does all the big things. And so he's looking to England to balance out. What we'll see is he has, there is this relationship with the English going back to Kamehameha the First. Kaahumanu is going to be drawing closer and closer to the Americans, the ABCFM, the missionaries, but also a lot of the American merchants. But England gave him a 6-gun schooner in 1821, so it was like, it's a small ship by English standards, a big ship by Hawaiian standards. And so he's like, well, I'll go to England and try and get some sort of English influence using the old English background to sort of empower me so that I can push back against Kaahumanu. And he shows up, the English don't know he's coming. They're just like, there's a Hawaiian king here waiting to see our king. And so there's this big sort of like, what do we do? I don't know. Like, he just showed up. These things are usually planned out for months in advance. And so he's kind of cruising around England, meets a bunch of people, waiting for sort of the correct diplomatic moments to meet with the British king. And then he dies of measles in 1823. So actually his wife dies, and then he dies within days after. And now that leaves Kaahumanu without even, like, in reality, of course, she's running everything, but technically Kamehameha II is still king. There's still the possibility that Kamehameha II, as he grows older, might be able to take some of the power back for himself, but now he's dead. He's gone. And Kaahumanu is the regent. She's ruling in the name of Kamehameha III, who's too young to take over rule. I mean, he's still a child. And that's it for Kamehameha II. The early reign, she's constantly sort of flexing her muscles, doing all these things that strengthen her power over, especially her power over chiefs. Because if you have the power over the chiefs, then you have power over everything. So, when she ends the kapu system, that's a display of her mana and her political power. The kapu system is gone, but people still believe in mana. They still believe in this sort of personal sort of power, personal influence, personal mana. And she has it. She displays it. The ending of the kapu system. I mean, how much mana do you have to defeat the gods? And that's what she did. The Council of Chiefs still exists, but they're mostly under her power, and most of them are her Maui relatives, her brothers. It's all under her thumb. Kamehameha actually, before he died, had given all his Kona supporters their own personal lands that are outside of the king's control and then outside of her control when she takes over, because he knew that they'd all be stripped of influence and power when she comes in, and she'd bring in all these Maui ohana. And they became sort of known as kaahumanu them. That's sort of that inner circle around her. And then she opens up the sandalwood trade. Now, this is going to have disastrous consequences in terms of the environment, because people are just going to, the chiefs are just going to go up and just take as much sandalwood as possible. It's going to have some pretty disastrous health consequences, because so much effort is put into the sandalwood trade. There are accounts that food crops are neglected during this era, because of the sandalwood trade. But when she opens up the sandalwood trade, she's essentially telling all the chiefs that you can go make money. You can go make a ton of money, because one shipload of sandalwood, when it gets to China is going to be incredibly that's an incredible amount of wealth. So these British and mostly at this point, but American merchants are they're willing to pay tons of money and mostly in goods, give you tons of goods, all kinds of fine goods, but also cloth, other things, in exchange for sandalwood. Opening this up, when Kamehameha did it, he did it to deny the chiefs that sort of source of wealth, and also hold a monopoly on it to keep the price high. When she does it, she opens it up, and then all of those chiefs that make money off of sandalwood owe her, because she's the one who opened it up for her, or for them. And then she doesn't have a kalai aina, no kalai aina, no cutting up the lands. And she basically says, I control all the lands, and everyone continues. You can continue to use the lands that you're using, but at no point will I distribute lands. There's no kalai aina, except for the lands Kamehameha directly gave out. Nobody gets lands, and Kamehameha the second and Kamehameha the third, she denies both of them lands. She holds all the lands. She says the Kuhina Nui is able to control all the lands. Neither of the kings gets land, and if they don't have land, they can't feed their supporters. So they're dependent on her for the resources to feed their supporters. And that means she is their king. She is their mo'i. She's their queen. She's running the show because she feeds them, not the other way around. And then finally, this is one of the sort of like brilliant moments. She controls everything except for Kauai. Kauai was still in this weird situation where technically they're like, oh, Kamehameha is king, but Kauai is still ruled by the Kauai dynasty. It's Kaumuali'i he's running Kauai. At one point in like the teens, he teamed up with the Russians and was like working out a deal where if the Russians came down and invaded, Kaumuali'i gets Oahu and Kauai, and he was going to give the Russians everything else in order to defeat Kamehameha. Kamehameha gets wind of this and puts a stop to it. But Kaumuali'i he's looking for ways out. Kamehameha never has the military strength to really take Kauai. He's never able to do it. So this is I screwed this one up. It's not Kawi Keoli, it's Liho Liho. Okay, sorry. Let me fix this real quick. Okay. So Liho actually, before he goes to England, he's looking for things he can do that'll show his influence, that'll display his mana essentially. Prove his mana. And so he thinks, the one thing my dad was never able to do was conquer Kauai. And I don't have an army, but what if I can do it through some trickery, etc. So he sails to Kauai, tells Kaumuali'i and his son, Keli'i Honui, come aboard the ship and we'll we'll have basically a party on the boat. It'll be a signal of our connections and our ties and all this kind of stuff. And they get aboard the ship, they have a party, and then he kidnaps them. He takes them to Oahu and is like, look, I did this. Kamehameha my father was never able to do this, but I have captured Kaumuali'i and his son, Keali'i Ahonui. And this is, partly there's a statement to Kaahumanu that I'm still here. I am still able to participate in politics. And what this is, dude, so Kaahumanu is like, oh, that's cool, you went and captured the king. So what she ends up doing is she takes Kaumuali'i and his son as her lovers and advisors. And then later on, when Christian marriage is introduced, she marries Kaumuali'i, and then when he dies, she marries Keali'i Ahonui. And they're still the rulers of Kauai. Technically, they still rule Kauai, but Kaahumanu rules them. And she displays them. They're both really good looking dudes. And there's these accounts of her riding in a carriage with them, with the two of them, to display to everybody that Kaahumanu captured them. Liho Liho fetched them, but Kaahumanu is the one who has them. And the agreement works out for Kaumuali'i and later on for Keali'i Ahonui, because sure, they're under Kahumanu's thumb, but at the same time they go from ruling Kauai to still mostly ruling Kauai, but also being connected to and advisors to the most powerful person in the whole kingdom. This move actually, Liho thinks of it as a way for him to get power and take power away from Kaumuali'i and take power away from Kaahumanu at the same time. And what he ends up doing is he gives kaahumanu away for Kaumoali'i and Kaahumanu to both become more powerful because they're now allied together. And it's just, it's a brilliant stroke. Like that's kaahumanu, is the ability to do these things, to do it, to get away with it, and then to be powerful enough that no one's really gonna be able to push back. Some people do try and push back. George Humehume was another of Kamuali'i's sons. He's older actually, but he is of lesser rank because his mother is lower ranked. He had gone to New England in his youth, and then he was a U.S. Marine. He was a sailor. He fought in the War of 1812 for the U.S. and he came back with the missionaries. So the missionaries, we'll talk about the missionaries in a bit, but they come in 1820. He comes back with them, and is like, "Oh, like I'm son of the chief of Kauai. Take me back, and I'll help you convert people on Kauai." When he gets home, he goes to Kauai and is like, "Whatever you guys do, don't listen to these missionaries. They're full of it." When Kaumoali'i dies, George Humehume rebels essentially against Kaahumanu, but also against his brother. And he's arguing that his brother is just a puppet of Kaahumanu. And so all these young chiefs, these young Kauai chiefs, were like, we're Kauai people. We don't bow down to these Hawaii Island and Maui Island people. And so they back him. And so it's a couple hundred of them. Kaahumanu takes a force over, defeats them pretty easily. And then after that, once the rebellion's over, she ends this business of Kauai technically being independent. After that, Kauai is part of the kingdom. Kauai is under her rule, not under her rule because she's with Keali'i Ahonui, but it's under her rule because Kaahumanu said so, and she conquered it with a force. The camera has frozen, so I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I am not very good at this, and my computer is not handling this too good. I did not buy a computer. Bought a little MacBook. It's cute. It's not meant for doing very intensive things. Okay. So, and that's it anyway. The next lecture starts right after this. You can watch it now. You can watch it later. But this is like the early reign of Kaahumanu, in just within the space of 3 or 4 years. Look, she goes from being the widow of the king to essentially ruling everything almost undisputed. And we'll see there's a little bit of dispute, but she's so powerful. She's like so powerful and so politically smart. No one's going to be able to do anything, really, outside of just armed rebellion with a lot of people. And as we'll see, it's really hard to get that done against Kaahumanu. And that's it. Let me close this off. I'll see you whenever you watch the next lecture.